The New Testament is the most popular book in history, mainly because it has the advantage of time. It was the first book to be printed on the printing press, and of course, it is considered to be sacred by many people. And another part of its popularity is that it has been translated into so many languages. And there are whole groups of people that work on doing this. There are 27 books in the New Testament, with 9 or 8 authors, depending on who you listen to. The authors are Matthew, John Mark, Luke the physician, John the son of Zebedee, the Apostle Paul, the Apostle Peter, Jude, James, and the author of Hebrews. Now, some people think this is Paul, but since we really don't know, and he didn't sign his name, he or she, maybe, then we'll just leave it at the author of Hebrews. God knows the answer, but I don't. The oral phase of the New Testament is the first phase it went through, and this would be simply the disciples listening to Jesus, his followers. And in this day, when there was a rabbi, the students were expected to memorize what their teacher said by rote. That is, they were expected to memorize it exactly, to not add or take anything away from it. So it was considered to be a very accurate form of transmission. In some cases, people considered it to be even better than the written word, which is very alien to our Western way of thinking. But one of the things you need to think about in approaching the New Testament is that we need to kind of suspend some of our Western ideas that we grew up in, because this is not a Western culture. This is ancient Near Eastern culture. The next phase the New Testament went through is the literary phase, and this is the disciples and associates of disciples writing down the life of Christ in the Gospels, and also the letters of Paul, the book of Acts. All those are being written down. And then there was a phase called the canonization phase. And here's where we start to talk about what books are considered as making the cut to be in the New Testament and which ones aren't. Because there are a lot of books that sometimes are called the lost books of the New Testament or the hidden books. Actually, they've never been lost. We've known about them all along, and we have copies of them. And you can go to your bookstore or Amazon and download them right now if you want to and read them. But there's one thing apparent to me about those books that didn't make the cut, and that is they are not on the level with the books that are in Scripture. So there's no conspiracy here of the Catholic Church or any other church. Canon literally means measuring reed, and it was a carpenter's tool or a stonemason's tool of the day, sort of like a yardstick. It came to mean over the years, though, a closed collection of writings viewed by believers as authoritative for faith and the Christian life. So the canonization process, the first ones that were canonized as Scripture was Paul's letters. These are the letters he wrote to churches for various needs that they were having, answering questions they had, or simply writing letters to churches. And the early church began to say that these were sacred a large part of the early church by AD 125, and maybe even earlier than that. Some early canons that early church fathers put together was Clement. His was in AD 95, Ignatius of Antioch in AD 116, Papias in AD 125, and Irenaeus in AD 179. And then the emergence of the canon as we know it today. Marcion is the first one I've listed there, also known as Marcion the heretic. Well, he's listed as a heretic because he threw out most of the books that Christians understand as part of the New Testament. He also said that God could not be good because he invented grasshoppers, crocodiles, and sex. Anyway, he put his canon together around 140. Muratorian came along in 170. Eusebius, the early church historian, did his in AD 325, and then Athanasius in AD 367, and he included all of the books that are part of the canon today. So Athanasius is really the first one to do that. The Council of Carthage in 397 AD recognize the present 27 books as canonical or authoritative and sacred in nature, and the text of the New Testament is fixed. In other words, you can't add stuff to it, in the original language, that is. Of course, translation is a different matter, and the ins and outs of translation is beyond the scope of this course. The Council of Carthage used these guidelines for inclusion of a work in the New Testament. The first one is that the person who wrote it either had to be one of the 12 who walked with Jesus and knew him personally, or they had to be a close associate of an apostle. And an example of this is John Mark, who probably knew Jesus, wasn't one of the 12, but he was a close associate of Peter. And the earliest church tradition says that the Gospel of Mark, written by John Mark, is him writing down what Peter remembered about Jesus. Orthodoxy is the next one, and that is the book consistent with the teaching of Christ and the teaching of Judaism in that tradition? Popularity is another, that is, what books were widely accepted already by the church as being authoritative for faith and practice. And the last one is moral effect. Was it morally edifying, morally uplifting? The writing materials, well, I have some cool videos for you for this lecture we'll look at in just a minute. But there were papyrus, which is made from a reed, and you'll see a video on how they actually make papyrus and made it back in the day. Vellum, which is a very fine material, normally made from calf hide or a baby goat, almost translucent, very difficult to make, very time intensive. And parchment, which is animal skin, probably sheep or cow hide, except not like you would think of as leather. It was really conditioned to write on. It's not like you could go down and get a ream of paper at Staples. You had to go out and actually kill an animal, dry the skin, scrape it. It was very time intensive and very expensive. So not just everyone was walking around with copies of the New Testament the way we have today. The cool thing about especially vellum and parchment is that these materials last for thousands of years. The Bible that you have for this class probably would not last 1,000 years because it's made of mass-produced paper. These were not, as you'll see in the videos. The original language of the New Testament is Koine Greek. There are 5,488 ancient Greek manuscripts that have survived, and those are everything from fragments to complete books. And then there are other early manuscripts that were translated from Koine Greek into Latin, Aramaic, and Hebrew. Of our study, which is approximately 10,000 square miles. It's about the size of the state of Vermont, actually. There are 3 provinces that are of interest to us in New Testament study. They are Galilee, Samaria, and Judea. Here's a map of the area, and you can see Galilee up here in the north, and Samaria in the middle, and Judea down here. Out here we have the Mediterranean Sea, the plain of Sharon, and then it goes up to a ridge here along where these cities are, because they were easily defensible. It was a good place to have cities. And then down to the Jordan River Valley, and finally down to the Dead Sea. Decapolis also plays into our study in a minor way. We'll talk about that later when we read the Gospels. Out on this side goes out into the Transjordan Plateau in the desert. Okay, I want to show you now some videos. The first one is how parchment is made. So here we go.
I've come to Buckinghamshire to meet Wim Vischer, one of the few people who still makes parchment in the traditional way.
Right, this is where it all starts.
Okay.
You may need to hold your nose. These are natural animal skins. They're raw skins, you know, they do smell.
Yes, it's quite a strong smell, isn't it?
Yeah. So there we are. There's a calf skin, preserved in salt, and that'll keep for up to 6 months like that. And we've been very, very careful in selecting these. We have to literally select every single skin to make them good enough for parchment. The big problem with parchment compared with leather is that there's no dye, no printing, so you see the actual skin when it's finished and you write on it. And so any blemishes also show up.
So what's the next stage of the process?
Well, we've got to start cleaning the skins up, getting rid of the salt, and I've got some pretty primitive washing machines here to show you. I'll just turn it off. I'll show you what's going on in here. Here we are. These skins are soaked in lime, and the lime works into the skin and loosens the roots of the hair. See how it starts to become loose? And that's entirely due to the lime acting through the skin.
Yeah, it comes away really easily, doesn't it?
Yeah. And so this skin's been in here for quite a few days.
It feels very smooth on the skin.
Yeah. So you're left there with the skin surface completely undamaged, which will be the surface of the parchment.
Yeah.
So the next stage is to remove all that hair. There we are. The way this works, you trap the skin there with your body, and off you go.
So we take it from here for a further stage of cleaning?
Yep, the other side hasn't been touched yet. That was the side where the meat was.
Oh yeah. So this is fat on the skin.
Yes.
And that's going to be really difficult to get away. It's completely unlike the hair, isn't it?
It's really tough.
How do you actually get this side off then?
Knives, scraping. So Lee's working on this at the minute. And the main idea is that the skin has to be stretched in a frame so that, as you can see, you can start to clean it and scrape it. And it's the essence of parchment making. Basic, very simple stuff, but you've got to really get all that muck off there, all the flesh, all the dirt, to make a perfect surface.
It looks a very laborious and skillful process.
It is, but it's quite simple. You want to have a go?
I'd love to, yeah.
It's like a punching motion, so you punch at the flesh, so you're trying to raise the flesh up.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay.
Right,
And this, I'm not going to sort of cut through here, am I?
No, this will take quite a lot of work.
Right, okay. Right. So I punch into it.
That's it, you want slightly shorter movements.
Shorter?
Yep, that's it.
So finally, it's the drying stage. Here they are all drying. We've got heat in here to dry them, and they'll be in here for half a day, something like that. Depends again, summer or winter, it changes a bit. And when they're just right, we'll cut them out.
How long has it taken to get to this stage?
About 4 weeks. I'll just show Stephen. There you go. Have to watch we don't crease it. There's quite a nice large skin, but it needs a bit of sanding doing to it. That's about all. Apart from that, that's the finished parchment. And you see the other side is as clean as the side that we were looking at.
It's really nice to hold it in the hands.
Yeah.
In the Middle Ages, parchment was used to make the pages of books. Parchment was made from the skins of animals. The transition from a fresh skin to a surface suitable for writing was a slow and laborious process. The parchment maker selected skins of sheep, goats, or calves. Skins were soaked in lime water for 3 to 10 days to loosen the animal's hair. The parchment maker then scraped away the hair and any remaining flesh. After this, the skin was soaked in fresh water to remove the lime and then stretched tightly on a frame. A special rounded knife was used to scrape the hide to the desired thickness. The process of scraping continued over the course of several days. During this time, the parchment maker continually tightened the tension on the stretching frame while the skin dried. The result was parchment, a smooth and durable material that could last over 1,000 years. Before parchment could be written on, it had to be specially prepared. First, the parchment was rubbed with pumice powder to roughen the surface, and then dusted with a sticky powder. These steps made the surface receptive to inks and colors. The whole finished skin was then cut down to the size of the pages needed for a particular book. A big manuscript was assembled from sheets almost as large as a single skin. For smaller books, the skin was cut into 2 or more pieces. The parchment sheets were folded and nested to make gatherings, usually of 16 or 20 pages. The vibrant illuminations in a medieval manuscript often overshadow the words on the page, yet the writing of the script was as important as the painting of the images. The tools of a scribe, the person who copied the text onto the page, were simple. Pens, called quills, were made from the feathers of a bird, which were soaked in water, dried, and hardened with heated sand. The scribe carved the quill to a rough point, cut a slit to draw ink down, then trimmed the point to the proper width. The shape of the quill point varied with the style of the lettering being copied. Scribes made ink from a variety of materials. Gallnuts, growths found on oak trees, were often used to create a dark black ink. Black ink was also made by dissolving a common carbon substance. The resulting ink was called lampblack. Before the scribe began writing, he ruled the parchment using a straight edge. Medieval scribes and their patrons prized a regular and elegant script. If a scribe made an error, he would scratch it out with a penknife. Because the page was made from parchment, which was very resilient, it could stand many erasures of this type. An illuminator decorated the pages of a manuscript using paint and precious metals. He began only after a scribe had finished copying the text. The illuminator first sketched his design, then added details, such as the features of a figure or the interlacing of a decorated initial. Thin sheets of precious metals, like gold leaf, were always applied first. The illuminator put down a base coat, consisting of either a plaster-like substance called gesso or a gum, as shown here. Once the gum base dried, the moisture in the illuminator's breath was enough to make the small piece of gold leaf stick to the page. Then the illuminator brushed away the excess and polished the gold leaf. After applying the gold leaf, the illuminator painted his design. Each color was made from a vegetable dye or a mineral substance ground up and dissolved in liquid. The illuminator applied the paler shades first, then the darker tones. Once the illuminator applied black outlines and delicate white highlights to the figures and vines, the illumination was finished. After the scribes and illuminators had finished writing and decorating the parchment pages, the manuscript was bound. Groups of folded sheets of parchment, called gatherings, were sewn together with strong linen thread onto flexible supports, such as these narrow leather thongs. Next, the binder attached end bands, which secured the top and bottom ends of the pages in the spine of the book. The binder then laced the leather thongs along the spine through channels and tunnels, which had been carved into wood boards. These boards were the covers of the manuscript. The thongs could be held in place by wood pegs or iron nails. The volume was then covered, usually with leather. Without pressure from the covers to keep the leaves flat, parchment expanded and contracted with changes in temperature and humidity. Pressure was applied by the addition of clasps or straps, which held the book closed. The binding of a manuscript could be decorated with any one of a variety of materials. A manuscript might be covered with leather, stamped or tooled with gold, or covered with silks or velvets. The most elaborate bindings received sculpted decoration made from precious metals. The materials of the binding depended on the wealth of the patron, the type of manuscript, and its intended use.
Papyrus plant. The plant grows up in the River Nile but nowadays we have special places for it. It's considered to be a holy plant for the Egyptian people because of two reasons. The first reason is the shape of the flower, looks like the rays of the sun, and we use it for making perfumes. The second shape is the shape of the stem, takes a pyramidal shape like the pyramids, and pyramids was a symbol of eternal life. The flower, we use it for making perfumes. The stem we will use for making such a piece of paper like this one here behind me. But I cut the stem into small pieces, vertical and horizontal, according to the size of the picture we would like to make. I'll cut a small one to show you how. Then we will remove the green part. This greenish cover was used for making baskets, sandals, boats and ropes because it's so flexible and so strong as well, you see. But the most important part is this white inner part. We slice this into small slices, but as a natural plant it has a percentage of sugar and water inside the slices, and it was eatable by the Egyptian people like sugar cane because it's very sweet. But the slice is very prickable, you see. So slices very weak like this is not good for anything. So what we have to do is use this rolling pin to squeeze a little percentage of sugar and water out of the slices and break the fiber inside the slices to make the slices stronger and flexible than before by this rolling pin. Where you come from?
Canada.
Oh, the French part or the English part?
French.
French part.
The rest of us English.
First part. Okay. You still have the same rolling pin back there in Canada?
Yes.
For making pastry and cookies? Okay. No beating his husband if he came late home?
Maybe.
Maybe? Okay. I'm kidding. I'm not serious. Of course you don't do that. Then you watch the slice and get a strong, flexible, elastic slices. Then we will put the slices here to change the colors for 3 days or 6 days. The difference is the color of the paper we would like to make. 3 days you have the light papyrus like this color, 6 days you have got the brownish colored papyrus like that one there. So the longer you leave the slices in the plain water, the color changes to be dark. It doesn't affect the quality of the paper we have, it just all about the color, which one we like. Next stage is we bring carpets, 2 pieces of carpets like those ones here, and we start to weave the slices, one vertical and one horizontal. In the ancient days, people did not have carpets like this one. They used something else. They used the skin of the animals to weave the slices like this in between them. Crisscross, very close to each other's, has no spaces, has no holes in between them to make the slices to stick. So what will make the slices to stick together after that is a percentage of sugar inside the slices. So on and so on till here. Then we cover it. And this is to absorb the moisture because it's very wet, and we put them under anything heavy. Goes back to the ancient times, people had rocks or heavy stones, but nowadays we have the press machine, so we press them hard under the press and we would wait.
Amazing the ancient Egyptians could have figured all this out.
Yes, it's amazing how can those people actually figure out all of that, because sometimes when you see a flower or a plant like that, you wouldn't understand that you can make a sheet of papyrus out of this plant. So 3 days here, the same here, 6 days for the brown papyrus, the same under the press. What comes out, we put them under the sun for 1 day, and this is what comes out after 3 days in the plain water, and the 3 days under the press, and 1 day under the sun to dry. The darker brownish like that, 6 days here, 6 days under the press, and the same 1 day to dry. When you get this paper, the paper is very strong, okay? It's very flexible, and when you touch the paper, it feels the paper very smooth. Papyrus means in hieroglyphics, papyrus, and it means in English the baby skin. When you array this paper against any source of light, you can see the weaves. This is a difference. How can you recognize the difference in between the original papyrus paper, which has crisscrossed and small brown spots all over the slices, and fake one from banana leaves? The slices on that fake papyrus goes in one direction. And we say paper in English, by the way, because it comes from papyrus, to the Institute of the Fine Art and the schools of art here in Cairo to make all of the pictures, and most of them are copies from the original pieces in the Egyptian Museum, in our temples and in our tombs.